Now there's a surprise. The Right Reverend Keir Starmer, the holiest, most pious politician this side of Jerusalem, is in hot water over this photograph. It shows him downing a beer with colleagues during lockdown. In fact, it's video footage, and it seems to be pretty conclusive. Now, it seems like this beer scandal may reach the parts other scandals have failed to do, and the plot, like a good ale, thickens. After months of denial, in a Daily Mail exclusive, the Labour Party have finally admitted that Angela Rayner, Labour's eye-catching deputy leader, was actually present at this gathering too. This is a woman who's never out of the headlines and whose legs now have their own agent. By the way, the Mail also report that multiple eyewitnesses in Parliament have stood up the allegation that she joked about distracting Boris Johnson at PMQs. Now, on Beergate, as the Labour scandal has been dubbed, we need more information. And any alleged contravention may not be on the scale of the number 10 shenanigans. But the halo has slipped for St Keir and his holier-than-thou moralising Labour Party. This is an opposition that spent months focusing on the so-called Partygate scandal at the expense of the growing cost of living crisis. But I'm going to be consistent because I said on this programme last week that I don't care about Partygate, and therefore Sir Keir's Beergate, frankly, is unimportant too. It's the rules themselves and the extraordinarily damaging and, in my view, failed COVID measures which were the real scandal. Notwithstanding that even Keir Starmer himself may have flouted the rules, it is Labour and not just the Tories who are behind the problems that we have today. I've got no doubt that Keir Starmer is a nice enough bloke, clever even, and certainly decent. But I believe him to be a man of seriously flawed political judgment. Remember, this is the politician who campaigned for Putin-loving Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister. Starmer is a politician who has alienated half the voting population by not being able to say only women have a cervix. And it's a man who lost Labour the last general election by trying to cancel Brexit when he pushed for a second referendum. And I'm afraid, in my view, he got it wrong during the pandemic too. The leader of the opposition should have been just that, a voice of opposition, a questioning figure, someone demanding to know why the country was locking down, whether it was justified or would work, and what the impact on the country might be. He should have pushed for a cost-benefit analysis, which we're discovering now is an almighty show. Instead, what the Right Reverend Starmer wanted was more lockdowns, not fewer, more test and trace, brackets 34 billion quid down the drain, more spending, more borrowing, more human misery, more economic damage. Don't forget, he called Freedom Day reckless and sought evidence to justify keeping the country open over Christmas. When upwards of 100 Tory MPs voted against further COVID measures, it was Keir Starmer who could have prevented the damage that we've now seen. Labour, plus those Tory rebels, could have kept the country open for much of the pandemic, and we would have adopted the Swedish model of voluntary measures. Wear a mask if you want to, stay at home if you want to, but let the healthy and fit get on with their lives and contribute to the economy, which pays for everything. Remember, the spiralling inflation and the shocking cost of living, which will get worse, is all down to lockdowns. I wonder how many Brits who are suffering now would have tolerated the bonkers measures we've seen over the last 2 years, knowing what they do now. I can't think that many would have. And shall we take a quick look at how Sweden have been doing compared to countries that lock down hard? Here they are, with the two lines on the graph representing cumulative deaths in Sweden. Actually higher between 2016 and 2018, that's the upper green line, and then the lower red line illustrating 2019 to 2021. Boris Johnson is, of course, ultimately responsible for the COVID measures, along with the professors of doom at Sage, whose disastrously inaccurate modelling, 500,000 deaths, they said, got us into this mess in the first place. But this is on Keir Starmer too, because if I'd been the leader of the opposition, I would have voted against every single government COVID measure once it was clear in the summer months of 2020 that this virus wasn't going anywhere and could not be controlled, and that the measures were hugely destructive. At that point, I would have said no. Instead, I would have encouraged focused protection in care homes and among the vulnerable, as outlined by the Great Barrington Declaration. We heard this week of the horrific injustice suffered by those in care homes who lost their lives needlessly. I couldn't put it better than this young man on the BBC's Question Time show last night. Take a look.
Jamie, you asked this question. What do you think of what you've heard?
Well, I agree with what Mims was saying, to be honest, in general. I think what it shows that by Boris Johnson breaking the rules was that they were absurd in the first place and that we should never have gone into lockdown. And that it was the biggest mistake, I think, that the government has made, because we now have a mental health crisis, we now have children who have to catch up on their lost learning, and we have NHS backlogs of over 6 million people, and we have cancer patients who can't get seen, who died during lockdown. No one talks about that. Why are we not talking about the collateral damage from 2 years of lockdowns which have destroyed the economy and which have caused the cost of living crisis that's happened today?
Amen to that, brother. Cost of living crisis, down to lockdown. NHS waiting list of potentially up to 12 million people, down to lockdown. A mental health crisis, a wrecked economy and pensioners hungry and shivering in their homes, down to lockdown. A national debt of £2 trillion, down to lockdown. Damaged kids and closed schools, down to lockdown. This madness is on Boris, absolutely, and Sage, for sure. Sage are a turkey I'd like to see stuffed. But it's on the Carlsberg-loving Sir Keir Starmer too. Probably the worst leader of the opposition in the world, to coin a phrase. Whether or not Durham police find that he broke the rules when he ultimately reflects on the damage that the policies he supported have done to poor working people in particular, it will have him choking on that lager of his and will leave him with an almighty hangover. Bottoms up, Sir Keir Starmer, or should I say Sir Beer Starmer. I want a great leader of the Labour Party. And if I had my way, this moralising hypocrite would be down in one.